Chapter 10 of What Katy Did at School. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Karen Savage, Waco, Texas, May 2007. What Katy Did at School by Susan Coolidge. Chapter 10. A Budget of Letters. Hillsover, October 21st. Dearest Elsie, I didn't write you last Saturday because that was the day we came back to school, and there hasn't been 1 minute since when I could. We thought perhaps Miss Jane would let us off from the abstracts on Sunday, because it was the first day and school was hardly begun, and if she had I was going to write to you instead, but she didn't. She said the only way to keep girls out of mischief was to keep them busy. Rose Red is sure that something has gone wrong with Miss Jane's missionary during the vacation. She's so dreadfully cross. Oh dear, how I do hate to come back and be scolded by her again. I forget if I told you about the abstracts. They are of the sermons on Sunday, you know, and we have to give the texts and the heads and as much as we can remember of the rest. Sometimes Dr. Prince begins, "I shall divide my subject into 3 parts," and tells what they are going to be. When he does that, most of the girls take out their pencils and put them down, and then they don't listen any more. Katy and I don't, for she says it isn't right not to listen some. Miss Jane pretends that she reads all the abstracts through, but she doesn't. For once Rose Red, just to try her, wrote in the middle of hers, "I am sitting by my window at this moment, and a red cow is going down the street. I wonder if she is any relation to Mrs. Seacombe's cow," and Miss Jane never noticed it, but marked her perfect all the same. Wasn't it funny? But I must tell you about our journey back. Mr. Page came all the way with us and was ever so nice. Clarence rode down in the carriage to the depot. He gave me a real pretty India rubber and gold pencil for a good-bye present. I think you and Dorry would like Clarence, only just at first you might say he was rather rude and cross. I did, but now I like him ever so much. Cousin Olivia gave Katy a worked collar and sleeves, and me an embroidered pocket handkerchief with clover leaves in the corner. Wasn't it kind? I'm sorry I said in my last letter that we didn't enjoy our vacation. We didn't much, but it wasn't exactly Cousin Olivia's fault. She meant we should, but she didn't know how. Some people don't, you know. And don't tell anyone I said so, will you? Rose Red got here in the train before we did. She was so glad when we came that she cried. It was because she was homesick waiting 4 hours at the nunnery without us, she said. Rose is such a darling. She had a splendid vacation and went to 3 parties and a picnic. Isn't it queer? Her winter bonnet is black velvet trimmed with pink, and so is mine. I wanted blue at first, but Cousin Olivia said pink was more stylish, and now I am glad, because I like to be like Rose. Katy and I have got number 2 this term. It's a good deal pleasanter than our old room, and the entry stove is just outside the door, so we shall keep warm. There is sun, too, only Mrs. Nipson has nailed thick cotton over all the window, except a little place at the top. Every window in the house is just so. You can't think how mad the girls are about it. The first night we had an indignation meeting, and passed resolutions, and some of the girls said they wouldn't stay. They should write to their fathers to come and take them home. None of them did, though. It's perfectly forlorn not being able to look out. Oh dear, how I wish it were spring. We've got a new dining room. It's a great deal bigger than the old one, so now we all eat together, and don't have any first and second tables. It's ever so much nicer, for I used to get so dreadfully hungry waiting that I didn't know what to do. One thing is horrid, though, and that is that every girl has to make a remark in French every day at dinner. The remarks are about a subject. Mrs. Nipson gives out the subjects. Today the subject was les oiseaux, and Rose Red said, "J'aime beaucoup les oiseaux, et surtout ceux qui sont rôtis," which made us all laugh. That ridiculous little Bella Arkwright said, "J'aime beaucoup les oiseaux qui sing." She thought sing was French. Every girl in school began, "J'aime beaucoup les oiseaux." Tomorrow the subject is Jules César. I'm sure I don't know what to say. There isn't a word in Ollendorf about him. There aren't so many new scholars this term as there were last. The girls think it is because Mrs. Nipson isn't so popular as Mrs. Florence used to be. 2 or 3 of the new ones look pleasant, but I don't know them yet. Louisa Agnew is the nicest girl here next to Rose. Lily Page says she is vulgar because her father paints portraits and they don't know the same people that Cousin Olivia knows, but she isn't a bit. We went to spend the day there just before we left Ashburn, and her father and mother were splendid. Their house is just full of all sorts of queer, interesting things and pictures, and Mr. Agnew told us ever so many stories about painters and what they did. One was about a boy who used to make figures of lions in butter, and afterward he became famous. I forget his name. We had a lovely time. I wish you could see Lou's little sister Daisy. She's only 2 and a perfect little beauty. She has got 10 teeth and hardly ever cries. Please ask Papa. Just as Clover had got to this point she was interrupted by Katy, who walked in with her hat on, and a whole handful of letters. "See here," she cried. "Isn't this delightful? Miss Marsh took me with her to the post office, and we found these. 3 for you, and 2 for me, and 1 for Rose. Wait a minute till I give Rose hers, and we'll read them together." In another moment the two were cosily seated with their heads close together, opening their budget. First came one from Papa. "My dearest daughters," "It's for you too, you see," said Katy. "Last week came your letter of the 31st, and we were glad to hear that you were well and ready to go back to school. By the time this reaches you, you will be in Hillsover, and your winter term begun. Make the most of it, for we all feel as if we could never let you go from home again. Johnny says she shall rub Spaulding's prepared glue all over your dresses when you come back, so that you cannot stir. I am a little of the same way of thinking myself. Cecy has returned from boarding school, and set up as a young lady. Elsie is much excited over the party dresses which Mrs. Hall is having made for her, and goes over every day to see if anything new has come. I am glad on this account that you were away just now, for it would not be easy to keep steady heads and continue your studies with so much going on next door. I have sent Cousin Olivia a check to pay for the things she bought for you, and am much obliged to her for seeing that you were properly fitted out. Katy was very right to consider expense, but I wish you to have all things needful. I enclose 2 $10 bills, 1 for each of you, for pocket money, and with much love from the children am, yours affectionately, P. Carr. P.S. Cousin Helen has had a sharp attack, but is better. "I wish Papa would write longer letters," said Katy. "He always sends us money, but he don't send half enough words with it." She folded the letter and fondled it affectionately. "He's always so busy," replied Clover. "Don't you remember how he used to sit down at his desk and scribble off his letters, and how somebody was always sure to ring the bell before he got through? I'm very glad to have some money, for now I can pay the 62 cents I owe you. It's my turn to read. This is from Elsie, and a real long one. Put away the bills first, Katy, or they'll be lost. That's right. Now we'll begin together. Dear Clover, you don't know how glad I am when my turn comes to get a letter all to myself. Of course I read Papa's and all the rest you write to the family, but it never seems as if you were talking to me unless you begin, 'Dear Elsie.' I wish sometime you'd put in a little note marked 'Private' just for me, which nobody else need see. It would be such fun. Please do. I should think you would have hated staying at Cousin Olivia's. When I read what she said about your traveling dresses looking as if they had come out of the ark, I was too mad for anything. But I shouldn't think you'd want much to go back to school either, though sometimes it must be splendid. John has named her old stockinette doll, which she used to call Scratch Face, Nippy, after Mrs. Nipson, and I made her a muslin cap, and Dorry drew a pair of black spectacles round her eyes. She's a perfect fright, and John plays all the time that dreadful things happen to her. She pricks her with pins and pretends she has the earache, and lets her tumble down and hurt herself, till sometimes I nearly feel sorry, though it is all make-believe. When you wrote us about only having pudding for dinner, I didn't a bit. John put her into the rag closet that very day and has been starving her to death ever since, and Phil says it serves her right. You can't think how awfully lonely I sometimes get without you. If it wasn't for Helen Gibbs, that new girl I told you about, I shouldn't know what to do. She's the prettiest girl in Miss McCrane's school. Her hair curls just like mine, only it is 4 times as long and 1,000,000 times as thick, and her waist is really and truly not much bigger around than a bedpost. We're the greatest friends. She says she loves me just exactly as much as if I was her sister, but she never had any real sisters. She was quite mad the other day because I said I couldn't love her quite so well as you and Katy, and all recess time she wouldn't speak to me, but now we've made up. Dorry is so awfully in love with her that I can never get him to come into the room when she is here, and he blushes when we tease him about her. But this is a great secret. Dorry and I play chess every evening. He almost always beats unless Papa comes behind and helps me. Phil has learned too, because he always wants to do everything that we do. Dorry gives him a castle and a bishop and a knight and 4 pawns and then beats him in 6 moves. Phil gets so mad that we can't help laughing. Last night he buttoned his king up inside his jacket and said, "There, you can't checkmate me now anyway." Cecy has come home. She is a young lady now. She does her hair up quite different and wears long dresses. This winter she is going to parties, and Mrs. Hall is going to have a party for her on Thursday with real grown-up young ladies and gentlemen at it. Cecy has got some beautiful new dresses, a white muslin, a blue tarlatan, and a pink silk. The pink silk is the prettiest, I think. Cecy is real kind and lets me see all her things. She has got a lovely breastpin too, and a new fan with ivory sticks, and all sorts of things. I wish I was grown up. It must be so nice. I was to tell you something, only you mustn't tell anybody except Katy. Don't you remember how Cecy used to say that she never was going out to drive with young gentlemen, but was going to stay at home and read the Bible to poor people? Well, she